Somewhere between TSR and TikTok, D&D stopped being a hobby and it became a brand. Well, it started as a game in a Wisconsin basement, became $1 billion corporate property. Remember, we heard Watch's president tell you it was $1 billion IP, complete with shareholders, PR departments, and influencer pipelines, which we've discussed in prior videos. Let's pour one out for the game that started it all and talk about how it went from a do-it-yourself DIY dream to global brand management. By the way, if you look at the screen, yes, the die is loaded. The game is fixed to some extent. Folks, I'm Tenkar. We're here at the Tavern. Tonight, we're not rolling dice. We're rolling history. We're tracing how Dungeons and Dragons evolved from an amateur war game experiment into a political corporate machine and what that means for the hobby in the OSR. Back in 1974, D&D was lightning in a bottle. Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson weren't businessmen. They were tinkerers. They were do-it-yourselfers. They were house ruling. Early TSR was a shoestring operation, mimeographed rules, mail order dice, playtesting at conventions. You didn't buy D&D to consume it. You bought it to build with it. Every campaign was unique. Every referee was their own Gygax. And that was the soul of the early hobby. And then success creates its own monsters, right? Once the game exploded, TSR became a real company. And real companies have real problems. By the late 80s and early 90s, D&D was everywhere. Novels, toys, Saturday morning cartoons, beach towels, and of course, more settings than you could shake a stick at. All that expansion came at a price. TSR overproduced, especially its novels and box sets. It flooded the book trade, and in publishing those books could be returned for full credit if they didn't sell, and many did not sell. When the returns started rolling in, TSR was drowning in unsold inventory. Don't even talk to me about Dragon Dice. That's a whole other topic. Cash flow dried up, debts piled up, and creative burnout followed. By 1997, TSR wasn't a mighty dragon anymore. It was a wounded beast circling a drain. And then, from the far side, enters Wizard of the Coast. Wizards, the new kids on the block, had just made a fortune with Magic the Gathering. In 1997, they bought TSR, lock, stock, barrel, dungeon, box set. For a minute, the hobby rejoiced. D&D was saved. But Wizards didn't buy D&D as a game. They bought D&D as an asset. Third edition launched in 2000 with corporate polish, professional marketing, and it hit the ground running. The open game license, which if you were an OSR gamer, you've learned to love and hate at the same time, opened the floodgates for indie publishers. That was part of the genius. But then D&D was also entering its IP era. Rulebooks became product lines. Editions became sales cycles, right? It wasn't about your table anymore. It was about your wallet. And then came 1999. And Hasbro bought Wizards of the Coast for over $300 million. And that's when the game truly went corporate, right? Hasbro didn't care about dice rolls. They cared about quarterly earnings. They report to their stockholders. And from that point on, D&D wasn't just the world's first role-playing game. It wasn't just the world's best-selling RPG. It was a brand portfolio item. Every edition, every reprint, every live stream that Hasbro or WotC was attached to had to justify itself to shareholders. And in the process, the player became the product. Right? Fast forward to today. D&D isn't sold through hobby shops anymore, right? It's sold through content creators. Agencies like Wiley Night Talent now manage major D&D YouTubers and streamers. Creators who introduce new players, but also advertise them. Sponsorships, partnerships, tie-ins. It's no longer Gary behind the screen. It's a marketing team. And while that brings visibility, it also brings control. When your voice depends on brand deals, you don't question the brand. And that's, in my opinion, where the OSR comes in. The old school renaissance isn't just nostalgia, right? It's a bit rebellion. Small creators looked at what D&D had become and said, we're going to make our own games. Our way. No focus groups, right? No brand decks, making sure everything is covered. Maximize the profits. No permission slips, just dice. Imagination, rulings over rules. The OSR has kept alive what the early hobbyists built. And that is independence. D&D becoming an industry was inevitable. Success attracts suits across the board. But it's up to us, you, me, our fellow OSR enthusiasts, to decide and define what the hobby actually is. So while Wizards and Hasbro own the logo, they don't own adventure. Every time you pick up the dice, every time you improvise a ruling, publish a zine, publish your own house rules, hack an adventure, you go to a convention and you talk about your games with others, you're keeping the true spirit of D&D alive. The one born in Gary's basement, not in Hasbro's boardroom. And that's something that no corporation can monetize. But I'm sure they will find a way to try. If you enjoyed this deep dive into D&D and how D&D became an industry, hit like, share it with your adventuring party, your fellow gamers. Consider joining Tenkar's Minions and support this channel because it's, what's it, like PBS? It's viewers like you that allow channels like this to succeed. Till next time, keep your beer cold, your dice honest, your imagination free and uncompensated for. All right, folks. God bless.